Well, thank you. Again, my name is Steve Fry, and it's a pleasure to be here. We've been involved with the event marketing world for about 7 years now, and we've never done something as the Steves before. I think I'm going to change my name to Bob today. But nonetheless, we're going to try to make this a little bit lively. Talking about technology can sometimes be a little dull. Before we get started, just by show of hands, who amongst you represents the agency world? Okay, so and how about brands? So very few brands. We got plenty of room here in first class if you want to come up here. We'd be happy to serve you. And other vendors unrelated to brand or agency, any of those folks here? Okay, good. Well, what we're going to talk about today is these 5 points. The first one is accurate data collection. And we are passionate about making certain that brands and agencies have the information that they need to make good decisions. And first and foremost is that concept of accurate data collection. And I apologize, when we set this up, we didn't know how the room would be configured. I don't know if you can see this or not, but let me tell you, in our work with agencies, we have seen numerous times where people will write down or enter information in a variety of different ways. Not necessarily is it right or wrong, it's just different how you do it. And this example shows Fort Myers, Florida, written in an innumerable number of ways. And from a standpoint of technology, a database that looks at that sees each of those as something different. So when you come to reporting, it's very difficult to do well. So from the standpoint of accurate data collection, let's talk about the problems as an agency and as a brand that you face. First of all, people are not very good at writing. They'll write illegibly. You can't read it, and that's a challenge. They'll also use misspelled words. They'll use abbreviations that you have a hard time deciphering. They can be inconsistent in the formatting. Phone numbers, for example, they sometimes use parentheses, and they sometimes don't, or they'll use periods and dashes intermittently. There's also a significant challenge from the standpoint of relating data, and an example of that would be if I'm a field rep and I work in Las Vegas, we have seen in our experience that sometimes, depending upon how a system is created or if it's an Excel spreadsheet, they'll indicate Las Vegas, but they're part of the eastern U.S. market, which is not correct, but there's no way to fix that. So we see those sorts of problems. Of course, missing data is another issue. You want your people in the field to gather the right information and send that back to you, and oftentimes when you do that manually, the information you get back has holes in it. And then finally, calculation errors. It seems like people have a hard time adding and subtracting. And one of the funniest stories was, and I've seen this more than once, people will be asked, how many men were at the event, how many women were at the event? And they'll put 62% women and 54% men. And so I don't know where that place is, but I'm not too familiar with those sorts of events. So we talked about the challenges. Now let's look at some of the solutions that a well-executed and well-deployed portal will do for you as an agency. And again, we also talk as brand as well, because the brand benefits from these things. We would recommend when you look at building a portal that you have login and it's role-based, so you know who that individual is that's interacting with the system when they come to your portal. There's no guesswork involved. And based on who they are, they have access to information. And we know that sometimes you'll have an individual who will work as a field team manager in one occasion. They might be a rep in another. And still, in some of the smaller agencies, they might even play a home office role on occasion with other programs. Field validation is where the system makes certain that when you're entering information, that it's done correctly. It's back to the fields, the forms, if it's alphanumeric, we make sure that the information that we're collecting is what you're looking for. Required fields is what we use from a system standpoint to make sure we don't have missing data. And we see that in a manual process today, that people will, again, they'll send in information that's incomplete. But when it's automated, those people in the field cannot send in or submit that information unless or until they have completed all the parts that you need as a manager to review. Pre-established data tables and relationships, that sounds very dry, but what that means is that when I'm out in the field and I'm working with a digital portal or a dashboard, as we sometimes call it, I go in, and because of my role or because of the market I select, it automatically filters down, and I can pick the venues where I've been interacting, or I can pick the types of inventory that I'm supposed to gain access to. It's all done for me, so it eliminates a lot of those errors. And then from a calculation standpoint, we do a lot of math for people so they don't have to do the percentages and add them up and make them work. Just some examples, and these, again, I apologize, may be difficult to see, but when you have accurate data collection in a digital portal, you can have drop-down boxes and fields that self-conform to make certain that the data that's entered is accurate. These two examples on the top, one is a scheduling system, and I think what's great about systems like that is where if you have people in the field that can work on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, when you go to schedule an event on Saturday, those individuals will not even be there to be scheduled. If you're on the agency side and you've been working events, you know you pull your hair out when you're trying to get things in alignment to get people at the right place at the right time. And when you have the system help you with that, it makes that much, much easier. So that was the first one, accurate data collection. Now we're going to talk about the second key point, and that is time savings for the entire team. And I can ask, but I'm sure I know the answer. Who amongst you couldn't use some more time in your day? And you see here from this picture, we've got this poor person that's having to deal with the phone, the fax, the email, shipping out courier packages. That is the world that you all live in. And as a practice, we get to spend time in the event space. We also do a lot of work with the insurance and financial services and manufacturing areas. And their worlds are much slower paced than yours. And so we have a lot of fun watching the event space and the pace at which you all work. I admire you for it, and I don't know how you do it. But the folks on the right here in this diagram represent people that have a well-designed and executed portal. Their life is much easier because they're not having to do all that double and triple work, and they're not having to do all the babysitting that is common where practices are more manually based.
And they are thumbs up.
They are thumbs up, that's correct. So when we talk about saving time for the team, what are the challenges? Well, right now, I bet you, if you're in the agency side, you spend a fair amount of time correcting data that comes in. Again, if you're not currently using a well-executed portal. You're also spending a significant amount of time distributing information, and as new information comes to you, you have to redistribute that information. Again, those things take a lot of time. You're also, I would imagine, working hard to do proactive team communication, which does take a substantial amount of time, and that's not a negative thing, it's just a challenge that you have to work with. You have, of course, you have to deal with the client, and that's a good thing. Clients want to know what's going on, and that takes time to do that well. Training is another area that is always challenging in that you've got people coming and going, and how do you get them up to speed on what they're supposed to know? And then finally, firefighting. Who amongst us has not come into to the morning to start our week? We have our to-do list, we're ready to go, and the phone call comes in from a client or from the field, and suddenly your whole day is, or if not your whole week, is totally changed as you have to go face a fire. So from the standpoint of using a well-implemented portal, how can we save you some time there? First of all, we can remove a lot of those remedial tasks that you spend your minutes or hours doing, and particularly when it comes to follow-up, that back and forth that you have to do, we can remove most, if not all of that. And I say we. I'm trying to not be salesy here. It's hard not to be because that's what we do. But generally, whether you pick us, as Steve said, or you pick another partner, that's up to you. But make sure you have these things on the table when you're trying to design and build your system.